Have you ever questioned everything you ever learned until now? You are not alone. Welcome to Mystical Mavericks, a tribe that embraces your uniqueness and superpowers. Discover how you can access your innate gifts and create a reality of fulfillment, purpose, and passion. Are you ready to go within to win? Discover the keys to success on The Mystical Mavericks Show with your host, Juju.
Bonjour, Mystical Mavericks. Such an honor to spend some time and space with you all today. We have a guest that is really going to show up in his light to demonstrate his journey to the self, through the self, and how he was able to overcome many deep-rooted challenges, inner and outer. So who is our next guest? None other the incredible Tucker Max. Tucker Max is the co-founder of Scribe Media, a company that helps you write, publish, and market your book. He's written 4 New York Times bestsellers, 3 hit number 1, which have sold over 4.5 million copies worldwide. He's credited with being the originator of the literary genre fratire and is only the 3rd writer to ever have 3 books on the New York Times nonfiction best-selling list at one time. He was nominated to the Time magazine 100 most influential list. So do you think perhaps he's got something to teach us? Well, I think so. Let's welcome our friend, a powerful light being, Tucker Max. Welcome.
Namaste, beautiful souls. We are on for a ride, so buckle up. This extraordinary guest today is going to show up with his light, and really, this is the show about, especially this episode with this fabulous guest, it is about self-actualization, self-realization. The one quality that I absolutely admire, love, respect about this guest is that he always show up with his natural, authentic self, no matter what. So, wow. Welcome, Tucker. How are you today, my friend?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So glad you're here. So if I had to write a movie about you, it would be the title, or maybe a book. It would be From Ignorance to Bliss. And subtitle, Why Breaking the Ego is the Only Choice on the Quest to Redemption, Acceptance, and Love. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So at the beginning of your career, what was your experience like overcoming defeat and criticism?
Oh man, overcoming defeat and criticism. I mean, that's
Take your time.
that's like the whole career. So, all right. So let me go through. Let's see. So, I was fired from being a lawyer 2.5 weeks in to the job. Like literally got fired. And then I wrote an email about it to my friends and who were all lawyers, and they thought it was hilarious and sent it to their friends, and it blew up and became this huge email. Like, you remember email forwards? Like, this is 20 years ago, right? And so I ended up getting blackballed from the legal profession because, like, I wrote the email and then I got fired. So the email was supposed to be funny about what I did, but the event ended up with me getting fired. And so, like, everyone in the legal profession knew who I was before I'd really even started. So I couldn't even go get another job. Not only did I get fired, I couldn't get another job. And so then I went to work for my dad, who like kind of had to retreat into the family business, which was restaurants in South Florida. And then my dad fired me from the family business in 6 months. So like literally the 2 things that I trained for in my life, a law and business, family business no less, I was ejected from. So during this time, I was writing emails to my friends, funny ones, like the ones that my friends forwarded around that got me blackballed. And one of my buddies from law school was like, listen, Tucker, you're not very good at law and business, but these emails you're writing are the funniest things I've ever read. Like you should go do this. And I'm like, what, be a writer? Like I'm some kind of bitch? I'm not going to be a writer. What are you talking about? It's like, well, you're not so good at the two things you trained for, so maybe this is what you should do. And so I took like 5 of my funniest emails. I sent them to this is like 2002. I sent them to every publisher and every agent in New York. And there were a lot then, way more than now. I probably sent out 500, maybe 1,000 like queries. And when I say I got 0 response, I mean like literally 0. 90% didn't respond, and then I got whatever it was, 50 rejection letters, and they're form letters, most of them. Although like 3 or 4 people actually went out of their way to write like personalized rejections, like this is the worst thing I've ever read. You should never write an email again. Like literally the stories that became the core of a book that invented a new literary genre and sold millions of copies around the world. People were like, this is awful, like this isn't even readable, like all that stuff. And so anyway, to complete rejection from the publishing industry, like a 100%. And so then what I did was, this was 2002. And so there was, even 5 years before then, there probably wouldn't have been another option. I just would have been done. Yep. But in 2002, you could go on this weird niche place called the internet. And you could put things up for free and people could read them for free. And so I was like, oh, okay. And you're old enough to remember GeoCities. Like I put my site up on GeoCities, and like it was, you had to learn to program HTML and it was nonsense. But my stories blew up. Like they took off. Like some funny site picked them up and published some or linked some of them. And then they just kind of blew up. And then MTV came and did a documentary thing about me because I was like meeting girls on the internet from the stories, which like in 2002, meeting people on the internet was the weirdest, creepiest thing of all time. And so, now 1/3 of people who get married meet their partner on chat apps or whatever, or Tinder. But back at the time, it was just creepy mass murderers and weirdos in their parents' basement. And me. And so, the MTV show took off, and then all the publishers who didn't want my stories came back and were like, "Oh, we want to publish your stories." And so it took me about 2 years to finish my first book. Came out, did pretty well. Like it hit the New York Times bestseller list for 2 weeks because I had built my own audience, right? Because everyone rejected me from every outlet, I was forced to build my own thing, which ended up being great. Short term, really hard and awful. Long term was amazing. And so then the book kind of trailed off a little bit. No media coverage, nothing. Just it hit the bestseller list from my own audience. And then it started taking off again, all word of mouth. And it started going and going and going. And then it got back on the New York Times bestseller list about a year later. And it stayed on for 5 calendar years. My first book, I Hope This Your Beer and Hell. And then I wrote 2 it's funny you talk about there was a movie made about my life. There's already been a movie made about my life.
I know.
And it came out before I was 34. I think it came out on my 34th birthday. And it didn't do very well at the box office, which it was the most ridiculous. It's funny, I'd fought and struggled so long and so hard for success, right? And I had it. And then I was like, the movie bombed and I was totally crushed. But the funny thing is, it's like the most ridiculous rich white person problem ever, right? Because think about that. I was a Hollywood movie had been made about my life. It came out before I was 34. And it didn't do $10 million at the box office the first weekend, and this was soul crushing to me. Think about for most people, just even being involved, any part of that would have been. It's not like I was still rich, I was still famous, I didn't lose anything. it was except ego, right? And so like it was crushing, but that ended up being the most important thing that's probably ever happened, single event that's ever happened to me in my life, because it kind of set me on a different path, right? Where I was like, look, it took me a while. It wasn't just overnight, but basically I realized if I am so fragile and so basically broken that a movie about my life not being the biggest movie of all time is soul crushing to me, something's not right. Like this isn't, and you know, I fixed everything in my life, like got in the best shape, you know, whatever. Everything external was perfect. And I was still pretty miserable. And don't get me wrong, being in shape and rich and famous is way better than being poor and fat and lonely, but it was like 10% better. Like, it wasn't like night and day. And so it was like, okay, well then the only thing left is in me. Like that's the problem has to be a way I think or a way I feel or something about that. And so then that started kind of my journey into, in the broadest sense, self-improvement or personal development. And what I didn't realize at the time, but it really was a spiritual journey, an emotional journey. And then I mean, therapy and psychedelic medicine and all that. I started a company that I just exited and met my wife. And now I have 4 kids and live on a ranch. And here I am, you know?
Here you are. However, I mean, somebody who's going to hear this, it's like, okay, I'm having obstacles, challenges in my life. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm being criticized and judged.
Yes.
I mean, that's what you went through, but over and over and over again. So when you hit that soul heart hole in your soul, can you go deeper with us? Because, you know, it's easy to say to people, hey, go take a course or meditate, right? It's easy to say, go meditate, take a course in meditation. But really, I mean, the way I feel about this is definitely not enough. It might be one of the key, right? But for you, I mean, I don't know, maybe you meditated for 10 hours a day. I don't know. That's what we're going to uncover through this episode. But so when you went into this, this hole in your soul, you know, you reached that point. Then what? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Did you go to your best friend and say, I need to talk to somebody? Did you cry for hours? I mean, you know, can you take us?
It's a great question.
If you remember a little bit, because you did say a spiritual journey.
Yeah, I did.
Right?
It was. Yeah. So, okay. It's a great question because it's I just summed up 20 years of growth in like 3 minutes, right? So it's really hard to understand. All right. So in short, I've noticed for almost everyone, and myself, this is true for, most people aren't really ready or willing to change until they've suffered enough, right? And so before the movie came out, I hadn't suffered enough, right? In fact, the best way to say it is most people would prefer the pain of what they know to the joy of what they don't. And I had not suffered enough to make me want to change, right? Even though I was miserable, I wasn't miserable enough. And so, you know, like when I was, you know, after my dad had fired me, I was poor and broke and whatever. And of course I thought in my head, well, if I'm just rich and famous, then like everything will be great. And I got like 5 times richer and more famous than I thought I needed to be for everything to be great. And like I said, things were like 10 or 20% better, but not much better, not like that much different. And so like that was confusing, but then it was still, you know, my thought was, oh, well, the next thing will make it, you know, well, when the movie's out, you know, well, okay, you know, 100,000 books sold is not enough, but 1 million will be. All right, 1 million wasn't enough, but 2 million will be. You know, and so when the movie came, I put a lot of my worth into the movie, like my self-worth, right? And so, I put a lot of effort into that. The movie didn't do well mainly because of what I did and a lot of decisions I made, which is a whole separate conversation. But the point is, I attached my identity to that movie. So if the movie was good, I was good. If the movie bombed, I suck. And the movie bombed. Which like it was awful when it happened. Like make no mistake about it, but it ended up being the best possible thing. Now there's no possible way anyone could have convinced me at the moment, when I'm sitting in my hotel room in Phoenix crying because the movie's bombed, that this is going to be good for you. Like, no, dude, get the hell out of my, no. Now, that was 2009. So 14 years later, I can see that, right? And I'm so happy that happened. If the movie had been a massive success, I would have never changed, right? Because what would have happened, and I know guys like this. If that had been a massive success, I would have been emotionally stuck in that moment the rest of my life, because I would have had multiple series of wins, and especially deeply ego-based narcissistic wins. No one would have ever been able to convince me that I was wrong ever again. No one would have ever been able to tell me anything. It was really kind of a crucial failure for me. It was early enough that I hadn't solidified and hardened, and now movie fails. It's not like I just became enlightened. I mean, it was 6 months of just accepting to myself that happened. And then, I fixed everything, because it's still like, well, there's other things. Okay, I'll get in great shape and get my finances together and move here. And I did all that, moved to Austin. I did all this stuff. And it was like, I felt a little bit better, but it was still not that different. And so I decided to start therapy, right? Like talk therapy, regular talk therapy. And it took me, I had to go through 20 therapists to find a good therapist, right? Like I actually had to I had to go to the therapist for therapists. Like there's like one analyst in Austin who's like specializes in other therapists. And I had to go to her, like an older woman who's just no bullshit, who's smart as hell, who can see through all my nonsense. Because most of the therapists that I went to, I was just way smarter than they were. Like in 2 sessions, I was breaking them instead of so that doesn't work. And so I eventually found her, and she was really good for me for a while, and helped me kind of unpack all my bullshit, and to understand rationally, logically, empirically what's going on in my head, connect a lot of dots for me, right? But then again, truly, like I went 4 years with her, and again, I probably felt 10% better at the end, like not that much, because, well, I'll get to why in a second. But so like that was a long sort of period of work. And then I met my wife about 3 years into talk therapy, and you met Veronica, you met her, and yeah, so and that was amazing. That was 10 years ago or so we've been together, and so like that was great. And then we started having kids, and amazing. Really, kids really forced me to grow. Kids are like a mirror. Everything that you are will be reflected back to you. People always say, "My kids teach me." Before I had kids, I thought like, your kids are idiots. They're 6. What are they teaching you? And it's not that they're like the wise little sages. It's just they reflect you back on you, and then you have to decide: am I going to actually face who I am or not? That's how they teach you, right? Yeah. And so then, but the real, honest for me, like the real thing that really shook up my whole world was when I did psychedelic medicine for the first time. I did MDMA therapy, and that was like a bomb being dropped on me. Like, 'cause what I realized from psychedelics was, MDMA specifically, I had never actually felt really hardly any of my emotions ever. Like when I first did psychedelic therapy, I was 3 or 4 years into being 4 or 5 years into being married. We had 2 kids already, and I realized, like, the first thing, once the medicine hit me, I felt the deepest, most profound love ever of my life. So deep that I realized I had never actually even felt love before. Like, what I was feeling was so qualitatively different. And it was like, and I was married with 2 kids, and I loved my kids and wife. Like, and so I realized I had spent my entire life thinking and not feeling. And so psychedelic medicine really helped me begin the journey of feeling. And that's the last 4 years has been adding feeling to my thinking. And then that's really not the only, that's not the only part of the journey. That's just been like the vast majority of the progress I've made on my spiritual journey has been once I started feeling my emotions, essentially. Yeah.
Because what you talked about really touched a nerve, I think, for so many of us who are striving for success, right? Like we identify with our name, we identify with our label, we
Yes.
identify with our certification, we identify with everything, if you really think about it, everything that we are not.
Yeah.
And so what you're describing from us is like what the levels of your self experiences that you went through. This is so good. This is so good because, you know, I get a lot of questions like, well, what's enlightenment? Blah, blah, blah. What's spirituality? But you get to tell us through your own pathways, the levels of the self, the thoughts, the mind, the process that you went through. I mean, you went through like miserable, like even though you were successful being miserable, right? Then you tried and you got it to a therapy session, talk session, which it's very valuable to open a door.
Yeah.
I personally don't believe it's the key, but it's a start. So you know what it is with you? It's like, even though maybe you didn't even consider yourself as a spiritual being, you know, all these things at the time.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Not at the time.
But
Not
it's
at all.
so interesting because when I'm hearing you, it's like you already were tapped in without knowing it to your intuition that you were already got without knowing it. This is the you know, the blessing in disguise is because you were unknowingly tapped in to open the doors necessary to activate your higher self without even knowing. This is so cool. Right?
You know what's funny? I still don't even think about it in those terms, like higher self or this or that, because
you don't need to.
Well, yes. And one of the things I've learned, this has kind of always been part of me, is as much as possible, the more I can avoid labels and identities, the better. Right? And so I'll give you a really good example. Probably the reason that I am such a successful writer is because I never tried to be a writer and I never identified as a writer. Like the reason I sat down to write was to make my friends laugh. And so all I ever tried to do was make my friends or readers laugh and enjoy the writing, not be a writer. They're not the same thing, right? And it's funny because I've seen the road to success for writers is littered with the bodies of people trying to be great writers instead of trying to solve a problem, entertain, whatever you're trying to do with your writing, you know? And I kind of, they all hated my guts too. It was so funny to watch those people who like spent their lives trying to be writers and just wrote crap because they were putting on airs or trying to have an identity and not trying to do the work. I just did the work. Same thing with the spiritual stuff. Like, there's so many of the spiritual people, whether they're good ones or frauds, they have an identity, a way they approach the world. And like, I don't mean is any judgment of that. I never adopted, I never liked any of that. One, because it just doesn't resonate with me. Like, I'm not going to be like an airy-fairy person, but also because putting on an identity to me always gets in the way of doing the work, you know? And so like, I didn't go on my spiritual journey to be a spiritual person. I don't want to be a spiritual person. You make me so happy
right now.
All I want is the peace. At first, I used to say, I want to be happy. I realized it's not actually true. What I wanted to be was at peace with myself and content with who and what I am. Not content like, oh, I'm just going to sit here and do nothing. Like, I still do stuff. I like doing things. But at peace is probably, I wanted to be at peace and not be so anxious and upset and not have such an internal chaos and turmoil, which I now I can see clearly. All of that comes from me running from pushing feelings away, running from issues or problems or emotions I have that I don't want to feel. I mean, if I have a ton of deep grief from my childhood, I can put that away and lock it away and not feel it, sure. But there's a price to pay for that. And the price is I'm going to be anxious. I'm going to always be struggling. I'm going to be pushing for success or I'm going to be doing something to occupy my time to keep my mind off of that. And so I eventually got to the point where I'm like, I'm tired of paying the price for not feeling my feelings. I'm going to turn and I'm going to face them and I'm going to feel them. And I didn't understand that at the beginning of the process, not consciously, or maybe I understood it unconsciously. I did not understand it consciously at all. Only just now, like the last couple of years, am I really starting to realize, oh, this whole spiritual journey is nothing more than me feeling my feelings, coming to grips with both truth and emotion. For a lot of people, coming to grips with truth is a very important part of spiritual journey. It wasn't for me. It wasn't as much for me because I've always, like your intro me, I've always been really good at accepting truth. That's been a thing that's never been a problem for me. Whereas like emotion, I was like, man, put that away. Like I'm not feeling any of that. And it's so funny because I have friends who are the opposite, who like they feel everything, but they don't want to recognize anything, you know? And like I was joking with a friend of mine, Brittany, where I'm like, if we could just switch problems, I'd solve yours in 10 minutes and you'd solve mine in 5 minutes. Or, but yeah, like the spiritual journey is recognizing truth and then feeling all your emotions, both that come from that truth. So for me, it was 90% feeling, 80% feeling.
It's so, and thank you for sharing because you've been speaking and I'm very sensitive. I'm sure you can tell, like you speak and then you give us like some wisdom bomb, you know, and it really, I don't believe so much in words, and I know you're a writer and you're a top writer. So I'm just speaking the truth. Like I don't read books because the words, they get away with the wisdom. They interfere for me, you know? So I put my hand on the book and I get the knowledge from the book by just putting my hand on the book because I get the vibration and the frequency, right? So when you speak, like today, you say things that have very clear vibration, and I'm not kidding. My body just go into chills. Yeah. Like it just lights up, right? It's so cool. So the wisdom that's inner you, that you're able to share is very powerful. And really what you've been sharing, it's about what? Hey, it's not outside, right? And even to sharing this, Chakra, is like self-realization, which is really the path that you've been on without even realizing that you are. It's like super powerful. And even to the point where you realize that emotion, which is really energy in motion, emotions, you know how, especially in this country, like a lot of people are wrapped up into emotions and they have to feel everything. But watch this, like when you feel emotional yourself before starting to write or your work, do you feel like it's actually going against your peace and it just kind of interfere with that neutral peace? You know what I'm saying? And I know I'm getting too deep maybe, but peace is not, because peace is not an emotion. Peace is peace.
No, so, okay. All right. So it actually, you're right.
Sorry,
in fact, I'm not sure if this is really correct. You could almost define peace as a lack of emotion.
Not
like a pushing away.
Amen.
More just as an absence, you know, which gets back to like what you were talking about a second ago, the questions you get about people asking what is enlightenment, right? Okay, I didn't go on with spiritual journey for enlightenment, never. I've always been on the search for truth, but enlightenment's much more than truth. It encompasses truth, but it's not only truth. What I've found is, I honestly think, there's a lot of people, almost all the great avatars have gotten it, whether we're talking about Jesus or Buddha or Krishna or go down the list of them, but they basically all say in some form or another, enlightenment is the release of all attachments and understanding the connection to all things at once and the recognition that that you are a part of a bigger system in a sense, like what Christians would call God, like like, I mean, I always connected with Buddhist teachings the most of all the avatars. And he's always taught, he teaches enlightenment is simply the release of all attachments, the acceptance of suffering, the releasing of attachments. And that's so hard to understand. Like, what I remember, like, reading stuff in college. I'm like, what the hell is this goon talking about? Like, this doesn't make any sense. But the last couple years, especially, it's exactly what you just said. He's using words to try and help people walk the path. But enlightenment is only an experience. It is not a thing you can understand from words, because it is only an experience. You can and the metaphor he uses is, like, I am the hand, pointing at the moon. Don't mistake my hand for the moon, right? And if enlightenment's the moon, it's like, I'm pointing the way to you for enlightenment, but my teachings are not enlightenment. They are the way to enlightenment. They are a way, not even the only way. They're just a way to enlightenment. And so that I find, the reason I find it difficult talking about enlightenment, even though I'm walking that path. One, I haven't really gotten there, so I'm like, it's this still me kind of. I've had flashes of what I think it is, but I'm not really, like, talking about it is a little hard for me, because I have very little, if any, experience of it, but also because it is a thing beyond words, right? And so I'm not far enough on my path for that part to talk about, like, it's even like with psychedelics and medicine and or spiritual and emotions. There's so much of it can only be understood with experiences, right? You have to do it. The metaphor I always use with people is say, listen, you can watch all the porn on earth, but it's not the same thing as having sex. People are like, oh yeah, right, of course, totally. Like, okay, that's what a spiritual journey is like. You gotta go have sex.
You gotta have sex. You gotta have sex with your soul, my brother. But it's like, but and then we're going to switch to a different theme here in a second, because we need to speak to entrepreneurs as well, which is we are now, because it's so important subject. But it's prior to consciousness, right? You are prior to consciousness. So if I'm going to tuck you a little bit. It's like you've already been enlightened. You don't need to seek it. You don't read about it. You don't need to practice it. It's your natural. It's a natural state. And I love
to be what you already are, but the path there is very long and hard.
And the path, when you get to the end of the path, that's it. You got it. Yeah. There is no path, right? No, so you get to the end of the path, but now you have your branch. But
everything's inside. I get totally 100%.
So there is no path at the end of the day. There's many paths to take you to the one path to tell you there is no path, because
ironically though, the only way to understand there's no path is to walk.
That's right. Exactly. But you have to go through the suffering, and I'm so glad. This is why I just love that you're here. I mean, just like, this is like a totally different level of consciousness with you, because the audience is going to experience it in a vibration kind of way, which is altering the consciousness, as similar as the things that you were taking, the psychedelics, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because now you do that to people. You talk to people and you unlock them. That's what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't sit for people or anything, but I just finished a piece about the beginner's guide to psychedelic medicine. It's just a tool. Mm-hmm. Psychedelics are one tool. It's sort of like the metaphor I always use is, listen, the point is to have the house, right? Like, you use a hammer to build the house, but you don't get obsessed with hammers. Hammers are just a tool, right? Like, they're a useful tool and they're cool, but they're not even the only tool. They're just an important tool to build a house. The point is the house. So it's the same thing on a spiritual journey. The point is being at peace and eventually enlightenment. The point's not the psychedelics or the meditation, or those are all just ways to get to a place, not the place. Totally, 100%.
Oh, amen. So they are tools for sure. So the self, talking about the self with a big S. So talking about tools, I'm going to give a shout out to my sponsor, BRAINTAP. So it's a trend, like meditation is a trend. What I love about BrainTap is a new technology because it's like goes into your brain, literally a technology, like a headset that you put on your head, your brain and your ears to light up the pathways of your brain, a powerful technology that literally does that, lighting up the pathway of your mind in purpose to unlock our full potential. So if you watch this, you're interested in trying BrainTap, you can try it for free, my friends, just by getting to the link of the podcast, the Mystical Entrepreneur.com. So try BrainTap. BrainTap. I'm very dyslexic, as you can see. So what's, I mean, so going into entrepreneur mode a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll tell you, you know what the bridge is to entrepreneurship? It's a very simple one from what we're talking about. I have every single entrepreneur I've ever known, and I've known a lot, is using, in some way, shape, or form, is using entrepreneurship to avoid their issues. And it doesn't, I'm not saying that to discount entrepreneurship or to disparage it or to say that starting a business is bad. No, I just sold a huge business. I think entrepreneurship is amazing. I think it's an amazing vehicle for change. I mean, if the point of business is to meet people's needs, I think there's a really good moral argument to be made that entrepreneurship is one of the most important activities on earth. All that being said, most entrepreneurs I know are doing it. They're running from their problems, and they're using their running from their problems to do something positive, which is great. It's way better than being a drug addict or fighting or doing whatever else to avoid your issues. You're creating something. That's actually the danger of entrepreneurship, is that you can be so good at it, and it can actually be so productive that you never actually face and turn and face your issues, you know? And I'll tell you, so many entrepreneurs I know, man, have seen my transformation, and they'll come to me and they want something similar. And so I'll start talking to them about this, and it eventually gets down to well, why do you do what you do? You know, why that business? What do you get from it? What do you want? And not all of them, because some of them really do love what they do in their business, and they need to do some things and go on a journey and heal themselves, but they'll come back. They're going to stay in the same business, which is great. But a lot of them, I see two buckets. One is that they are in a severely misaligned business. Like, the thing they're doing might be great, but they hate it, right? For some reason, it's just not working for them. Or I'll see ones that really want to heal, but they feel like if they heal, their superpower essentially comes from their trauma or from their wounds. And I totally get that, because that was me. I was the one who thought all my superpowers came from my wounds. Turns out, in a way, it actually is true. I don't want to be like, that's not true at all. No. If I hadn't written my stories, like my original Hope, Despair, Beer, and Hell, and all those books, if I hadn't written them then, I could not write them now. Not like I couldn't remember the events or anything. It's just like the emotional state that you need to be in to write those books. I just can't access it anymore. It's just not there. I have a different emotional state. I would say a higher conscious one, but yeah, there's a trade-off. You don't it's not like as you heal, you get funnier and funnier or something. No. Some people do. I don't. I was way funnier when I was sad and distraught and broken and lonely and covering it up with comedy. I mean, I'm still kind of funny, but not really. No one's paying me for funny anymore, which is fine, because I'm like, my life is way nicer. So I'm going to take that trade-off every time, So I do get the worry that a lot of entrepreneurs have, is that if I go on a healing journey, I'm going to lose my powers. Because some of them won't. Some just get better immediately. But there are some that their powers come from, not their powers, they have attributes and skills that can come from unhealed places. Totally. That's a thing. Yes. So that, in fact, I had one friend I can think about who, he came to me, was really thinking about doing MDMA therapy. And he's in a very high pressure business, like finance, basically high pressure, high stress. And he hates it. He's totally misaligned. This is the wrong business for him, like just clearly. And I'm like, look, man, let's be honest. You may not want to take this journey right now. And I'll tell you why. It depends what's most important to you. But if you really need, like, he was coming up on some big deal and there was like 6 months of stuff in front of him. And I'm like, the reality is if you start feeling your emotions now, after 45 years of not, it's not gonna make you better at being a deal maker and a hustler and that type. Like, it's not gonna help there, not in the short term at least. Long term, it might, but that's a lot of work away. And if for the next 6 months, if you need to be sharp in the way you've been for the last 45 years, feeling your emotions is not going to help. It's not. It's going to hurt. It's going to really hurt. Now, long term, and he got that actually. And so he's like, yeah, I wasn't sure. I don't know. Whereas others, and so he's coming out. He's so fried right now. I bet he's like getting to the point now where he's suffered so much that I think he's just going to be, I don't care anymore. Right. But I know others who are like, okay, like, I'm ready, like I'm ready to sort of, and you can go slow on this journey. You don't have to go fast. You don't have to wreck your life. You don't have to leave everything behind. You don't have to sell your business. None of that. I know plenty of people. I'll talk about one. I can say his name because he's been public about it. My friend Jeff Hayes. Do you know Jeff? I don't know if you, Eric, know Jeff.
Yeah,
just great. And he runs a film company called Revealed Films.
Yeah, okay. Waiting.
So Jeff, he wrote a book called Love and Drugs about doing MDMA therapy and how amazing it's been. It's transformed his business. Like his business has grown like 5x in the last 3 years once he started this therapy. Because like he was doing something already from a position of love, and he loves films. And now it's just his spiritual work has made him more of who he is, and so like he was already aligned. He just needed to do some of his own work, and it just helped his alignment. So if you're aligned, it actually rockets you. If you're not, it's gonna not help your business. But for some people, like that aren't aligned, they're like, okay, I'm ready to burn down that business. I'm ready to leave that. I want to go figure out who and what I am.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it just not just makes sense, but that you're speaking the truth. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's many truths, but there's only one truth, which is going back to who am I. And if somebody is out there listening, it's like, okay, they're struggling, they keep struggling. Listen to the signs. If you keep struggling, there's something that you need to unlock or, take. I don't know, everybody's so different, but just like if you keep struggling, you probably, like Tucker just said, it's like you're probably not in alignment, and you must start to go to who am I? Why not? And get to the layers, like he described himself, like go to the layers of yourself, to the old self. The guru means the one who enlighten, the one who gives light to the darkness. That's what it means, right? So I see you as a guru because guru, light and darkness, is the one who light up the darkness. I mean, that's what a guru is for yourself. Like find the guru within yourself, right? Like there's no like woo names or anything like that. It's just the truth. The truth is the truth. Go to your own self. Search deeper.
Yep.
And there is a quote. Let me see. I write a quote. I love this quote. I found it in your social media, and it goes back to what you said already. But I love it. I want to speak it out. It's every successful person I know, including myself at a time, used the pursuit of success to avoid painful emotion. Love that. It's so good. It's so good. It's just right to the point. So the defining turning point, defining moment when you started to seek the truth about what you are, you're basically telling us you had to go within to win. You gotta go within. You went within.
I mean, everything's just on a pure, like if someone's listening, they're very rationalistic. Like one of the things, just on a pure rational level, everything that we experience actually exists inside of us and not outside of us, right? So I'm not saying like this phone doesn't exist outside of me. It's a physical object, but my experience of this phone is purely internal, right? And again, if you don't understand that, what I'm talking about is the tactile sensation of it and the vision of it, what I see, what I hear from it, are all interpreted by my neurological system, right? All of it, right? My nervous system. And so it is all an interpretation. Quite literally, the light reflecting off of here goes into my eyes and is turned into electrical signals, blah, 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 the brain. Okay. So like, there is no such thing as an objective external reality of my experience. Debating whether an external reality exists on its own or not is a whole different conversation. But like, my experience is 100% subjective, and all things I experience, I only experience in my head, right? Whether or not they exist outside of my head or not. The best rubric for that, I like to use is if something requires my belief, then it's bullshit. If it doesn't require my belief, it's not, right? Okay, cool. So like the phone existing doesn't require my belief. Like I'm assuming like it's here whether I believe it or not. Okay, cool. But understanding that though, once you understand that, the implications are enormous, because from there it's like, oh shit. If everything I experience is actually in my head, it doesn't mean you can create fully your own reality in your head, because we do live in a physical interfaced universe. Like the table's here, you're there. I mean, but almost all aspects of my experience I can either control or shape or form, right? And so once you understand that, it's like, oh, hold on. And then the real kicker on that, like where the rubber really meets the road on that, is it took me years to understand this, is the understanding that everything I experience in my life is essentially my fault. Right? Now, it doesn't mean like if some drunk driver hits my car, I'm to blame. No. But everything that is in my life is at minimum my responsibility, and probably I created for myself. Right? Now, there's fringe ways you can kind of debate a little bit of that, but like there's an amazing sign I saw. I'm probably going to write this up and put it on my wall. If you're struggling right now and up to your neck in shit, don't worry. Everything will be fine. Just remember, you created all of this for yourself. It's true. If you are miserable, it is because you created it, or you're accepting it, or you're allowing it, or however you want to phrase it. And if you don't want to be miserable, all you really have to do is decide you're not going to be, and then start taking the actions that flow from that, right? It doesn't mean it's going to happen immediately, but like, and it's funny when people argue about this. I'm like, dude, just go read Viktor Frankl, right? And then don't read it. You can't argue anymore about this. Like, if that dude can survive literal death camps and come out of it like the most positive person on earth and not bullshitting himself, like really, then that's it. That's the end. There's no more conversation about whether this is possible. The only question now is, are you going to do it or not? That's it. Like, what life are you going to pick for yourself? I shouldn't say that, because I can understand saying, well, if I'm, born 7 feet tall and black, okay, fine. It shouldn't say, what experience of your life are you going to pick for yourself? Because that you definitely pick.
Okay, we're all going to have to take like a deep breath in and out, because I'm trying to suck everything in. That's so good. It's like a full 3 books on its own right there. It's just like, wow. Don't allow things so clear for you, so clear for me, but it's so unclear for so many talkers, so clear. And then the manifestation, you really spoke about what? The secret, right? I mean, we don't have to go through that conversation right now, but the secret is what? It's not a secret. you are the master of your destiny. You can create your own reality, but it's action, power of will, and action. Take action. I always say the biggest prayer is the action. Action is the biggest prayer. You don't take
action beginning with belief, though.
Well, yeah, but if you believe and you sit and you ask down meditation 10 hours a day, I tell people, I say, okay, meditation is one thing, but you got to get up, you got to take action.
Yes.
You cannot just sit and meditate. It's not going to show up at the door. Right?
I mean, yeah. You know, it's funny. You say it's not going to show up at the door, but then, like, a lot of times it can.
Yes, it does. But you're still...
So, I totally get what you... I totally get what you... I get what you're saying.
For most people.
Here's it's a paradox. It's a very paradoxical thing. I have found, though, that the most important action begins, like, because we just got to talk about everything's internal, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, if everything's internal, why do I need to take action? Well, I mean, first of all, a universe does exist outside of you. Things exist outside of you, and actions with them obviously create stuff, but also internal action. Like, the thing I focus most of my time now on is my internal belief system. Mm-hmm. What do I believe? Why? And really unpacking that, because as much work as I've done, I still have a lot of parts of me that I don't know and I haven't fully explored and I don't really fully understand. And I have found that it's funny. I really spend all my time now doing two things. Either very direct physical action, like on my ranch, like building a fence or making, a bookshelf. So things are purely physical almost, or very deeply introspective belief, feeling, emotional things, like almost no in between stuff, whereas it feels like most people hang out in between. Like they do kind of like things that are kind of action, like most keyboard jobs are total BS, right? It feels like action. You're not doing anything. You're not actually stopping, thinking, contemplating, meditating, feeling, and you're not actually doing anything. You're kind of stuck in between. And so what I've done now is divide my life into, as much as possible, I guess three things actually, because if I count relationships, which is a little bit of both, but family, wife, friends. So I spend a ton of time with the people I care the most about. I do a lot of purely physical action things. And then I also do quite a bit of nothing, quote, nothing, but it is time spent with myself, deeply introspective. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Like, what's going on with me? Right? For the modern American person, that can feel like time wasted.
Yep.
Right? But for me, it's the most important time I spend.
Only because it's the program, it's the condition that we've been conditioned with in school. You talked about second grade at one time, remember? In last conversation, in school, they were being conditioned to things that if you don't do anything, you're basically not doing anything. You have to do something in order to be intelligent in our world today, which is completely not true. But to spend time doing nothing is the best thing you can do for your evolution of your whatever success you want. Like, you got to get to that place to sit and do nothing. Schedule it. I do nothing from this time.
No, don't say do nothing though, because that confuses people.
Right, but do nothing in consciousness. Like you can be doing nothing and being conscious or not conscious about it. You can be just being lazy doing nothing, or doing something as you do your self-talk, which is working on the self.
I mean, straight up, the time I spend doing nothing is often the most intense, most difficult, most challenging. Correct. Because like, especially now, because like I've gotten pretty good at learning how to not hide from myself and not bullshit myself. And so like if I really stop, like if I really, no TV, nothing. Like if I'm really spending time with myself and not distracting myself in any way, things will get fucking intense.
Very
No
intense.
joke, man.
Very intense.
Like, cause like the things you're avoiding for a reason, right? They're painful, they're unpleasant, or they might be joyous, and you don't, you have some issue with feeling joy or whatever. Like there's a lot of things, and so that those can be the most challenging, right? But how else? I mean, that to me, that's the way. That's the only way, Like that is it. That's what you're looking for. That's what I'm looking for. Is the journey into myself. That's what I'm here for.
The journey to the self, through the self, is the only way. This is powerful stuff. And, I mean, at the end of the day, when you go through that journey, Tucker, do you feel like you got in touch with, well, what is the self really? When you scratch all the beliefs out, all the emotions out, you're left with one thing, right? I mean, I'm not going to take the word out of your mouth, and you don't have to say it today, but you're left with what?
You're left with nothing.
Nothingness.
Yeah. That's super advanced. That's super advanced.
But look, I'm so glad you touched on that, because you nailed it. Like the words that you use was very simple to understand versus like you go to a Google or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like they talk gibberish, you don't understand. But coming from you, it means something deeper, and then actually we can't understand. When you were talking about the camera, the object that you see, it's actually a reflection of, all this stuff is really important, because it's kind of simple in a way, but it's tough for the brain, because it's outside the brain. It's beyond it. You got to go beyond it, right? So what's something most entrepreneurs don't know about the book industry today? Anything? Yeah.
They don't know anything about it. All right. So honestly, the most entrepreneurs, when they approach the book industry, they're approaching it from a position of ego and validation. And so like a lot of them, because we've done thousands of books now at my company, so many of them will start off saying words about, I want to help people and this and that. But when I really start, well, why do you want to do this book? We really break them down. What they actually want from a book is some sort of validation, right? Like most entrepreneurs especially didn't do very well at school. And so like a book for them, and they have a lot of wounds from that are unaddressed. And so for them, a book is like, well, I'm going to, simplistically saying like, well, I'm going to show those people I'm not stupid or whatever, something like that. Or I'm important, or I'm this, or I'm that. A book in our culture has a very deep social significance. And there's nothing wrong with that, honestly. If you want to use the book for those things, that's okay. The only problem comes if you're not honest with yourself about that, right? Because then it's like, if you think you're writing it for other people, but you're really writing it to hit a bestseller list because you want to feel better about yourself, then you're not gonna write the book that's gonna get you what you want. So what we always do with our clients up front is, I shouldn't say our anymore. It's not my company anymore. But what we always, what they still do is really dive deep into what the author wants. What do you want from this book? What do you want? What do you want this book to get you as the author? Forget what it gets a reader. Like that's important, but it's far more important for you to understand what you want the book to get you. And then want to understand, is that realistic? Will it actually work? And then, because a lot of authors are very unrealistic, think, oh, I'm going to write a book and it'll be a New York Times bestseller and I'm going to be on Oprah and I'm going to be rich and famous. No, it's not going to happen. Right? And so like, is it realistic? But then also, will it even work? Like, will it get me what I want? Right? And so that's by far the most important thing, is understanding that for most authors, a book is not just a book. It is a lot more. Now, once you unpack that, it's super, it's like, well, I want this and I want that and I want it to drive my business. And okay, we can figure out how to do that. Let's do that. But the more honest you can be with yourself, the better your book experience will be.
So good. And it gets me to that point. And I've been following you and hearing you speak and why not. And you talk a lot about the importance of sharing a story, like the story, right?
Yeah.
And I think you've probably seen in your journey where entrepreneurs are writing books from more of a logic experience, like headspace, I call it.
Yes.
versus that emotion kind of talking to the audience. Can you share a little bit more about like the importance of the storytelling?
Right. So a lot of people will come in, especially the heavily left brain types and rational analytical types, and they'll be like, well, I can't talk about myself in the book. And I'm like, no, you totally can. And I don't want to say you should. There are definitely some books where sharing your whole story just doesn't make sense, right? So like, but what I always tell people is, I tell authors, readers love stories as long, like, all readers like stories. Any good story they're going to like. And they like to learn through story, right? And almost always they want to know about you, not necessarily everything about you, but they want to know, why are you the person to teach me what you're going to teach me, right? So like if you're reading a book about writing a book, you want to know that I know what I'm doing, right? They're like,
Yes.
okay, so why is this the dude I should listen to? Oh, he sold millions of copies and blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. He's done this. I get it, right? Now, you don't really probably care what I think about sheep, right? It has nothing to do with writing a book. So I don't write about that. So we definitely get a lot who come in thinking that it's not okay for them to have anything about their story. And usually we have to get them to put that part in, not just credibility, but also like, how did you learn this? How did you find this? Tell me a story about how you've helped a client. Like, that stuff's really important. I will tell you, we also get ones on the other side though, who are like, oh, like some accountant, who's like, got some great knowledge to help entrepreneurs, like, let's say, how to, do taxes or something. And they want to tell their whole story. It's like, dude, no one cares. Like, it's serious. If this book is about a cut and dry subject, no one cares about your childhood, right? Like, that's not relevant, because we'll get a lot of people who they want to tell their story. Like, they want to write a memoir, but they don't feel like they're allowed to. And so they try and make it a business book, but they want to cram all their memoir into it. I'm like, no, go write your memoir. It's totally valid. There's nothing more valid than a person who wants to tell their story. That's great. In a nonfiction book, you only use your story to help the reader learn. A memoir, it's about you. Go make it about you. That's totally valid. Nothing wrong with that at all.
So valuable. In the world today, I hear people talking about you like, you're like this, how they put it, you're like the master trend, like, a trend before it shows up, right? You have like the third eye about like 6 cents, 7 cents about the next trend, right? Like, so I mean, as a Mystical Mavericks, it's like, I mean, where does that come from you? Like, is it your intuition? How do you, and perhaps you want to share what's the next trend in a new world, like this new age, enlightenment age that we're in?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you my secret for trend spotting. It's really simple. The things that I'm super into always become trends. Now, I miss a lot of trends, right? So I don't get every single one. Like, I thought TikTok was stupid at the beginning. I still think it's stupid. It's a huge trend. So I miss a bunch. But so, like, I'm not the person to ask if something's going to hit. The reason to watch me is if I get into it, it always becomes something. Always. Like, I can't think of any exception. And so like right now, look, we sold a year ago, we sold our place in Austin, in town, moved an hour out to a ranch. I have spent the last year getting this place really dialed in. Like, we have a well, we have rainwater capture, we have solar, we have backup solar, we've got generators hooked up to, grid as well, like all the, defense stuff you could imagine. Like, I don't think we're going to see a societal collapse, but I think it's already happening. We're going into a phase of extreme chaos, of supply chain breakdowns, of grid failures, of all those things. And if you are not ready for that, you're going to be lucky if you come out of this only suffering. I think a lot of people are not going to make it. And I don't say that because I'm like excited about it. I just think it's the reality.
Yeah.
And so, we have our own food supply out here. Like, all of the meat my wife and I and family eat comes from our ranch. Like, I'm not messing around with this. And if you're not ready man, things are going to get rough for a while.
Here's the thing, I have to say, it's like, I wrote this down there. It's like technology is not wired to know the truth you are. Because when that hit the fan, that shit hit the fan, Tucker, come on, you and I just know this, right? It's like, if you don't know how to plant your own carrot, you're doomed. Like, you got to get back to the earth. You got to get there. And we're so turned on by all this magnetic, EMF technology crap that it's just shattering who we are as human beings. And we're not going to be able to survive that way because there's no connection to earth anymore. And that's a totally different show. But I'm glad you get into this, because that is not just a trend, but this is like the survival skills. Like, we have to teach our
it's
children.
not just a trend. This is like one of those like being into social media was an option. Being into sourcing your own, having resilient systems of energy and water and foods, it's like, if you don't do it, you may not make the next 10 years. Simply.
And I know, because I've been sharing this message out, with my tribe and whatnot, and a lot of people think I'm completely nuts, like I'm negative, or why not, but I'm like, no, this is coming. This is already here.
I don't know how you can pay attention to what's going on in the world the last 2 years and think this is nuts. Like, if you said this in 2019, I'd be like, yeah, you're a little nuts. Like, have you not paid attention? Like, look at what's going on. Just look.
Well, my parents in the 70s, they had the vision that the thing's going to hit the fan, right? And they bought a 60 acres ranch with, we had cows and all this. And I'm going back to that because I know that's where we need to go. Now, whether or not we're going to have followers, I don't know about that. But right now, I'm like, dude, I'm worried about my children. That's where it's at. And I'm glad you touched that subject, because it's very, very deep for me. And again, we cannot avoid the problem. We cannot have those blinders anymore, guys. We have to open up our consciousness, grow from within, and do what you need to do to have those killer survivors, because it's coming. And develop your intuition. That's important. It's coming.
Well, if you do your spiritual work, emotional work, the intuition just comes. Yeah, it comes with it.
It comes with it.
Never in a million years did I think that would be part of this, but like, that's been a huge benefit, yeah.
That's true. And now you can communicate with, your animals, like you can have those conversations.
I'm not at that level yet.
Yeah, but you will. I know you will. Because this stuff, powerful stuff. Yes. So what's, okay, so discussed, we're almost at the end here, a couple of more minutes. Mystical experience, what's, what has been your deepest mystical experience in the way? One of them, I know you shared a lot today.
Yeah. So, all right. So, about 2.5 years ago, I did MDMA combined with LSD, and it was the first time I'd done LSD. This was, obviously in a controlled medicinal setting. Mm-hmm. And I was an atheist the day before, and that experience, I had a deep, it was crazy. I essentially had a deeply religious experience, extremely. And it wasn't, the way people talk about it, I understand why so many rational people are atheists, because I was, and I understand why so many rational people dismiss the way religious people talk about God, because it just sounds like goddamn nonsense. But on LSD, I had a super clear, first, it was crazy. It was almost like someone was being like, look, walked me through what I knew about physics and chemistry, and like, look, you already know all of this is true. And I'm like, oh, of course everything is energy. I know E equals MC squared, of course. And it kind of like led me the next step beyond all the stuff I knew. It was like, oh, obviously this is true. But then it was more than that. And then it got deeper, and it was like I had the deep experience of oneness, right? Mm. And I'm like, oh, this is what Jesus meant when he said the kingdom of heaven is within. And I remember like feeling almost like I had lost my entire self and became part of everything. And then realizing that's what it is all the time. Like there is a me, but it's essentially it's an eddy in a stream of larger things, right? So like, the me I understand of is me, it exists, but it doesn't really exist the way I think of something that is permanent and forever and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. And then like once I had that oneness, I was like, this is what people who say they have a relationship with God are feeling. And the next day, I called up my friend who's Mormon. And he's a brilliant guy, Ben Hardy. Like I think you even know Ben. Like he writes a bunch of. He's a brilliant dude, really smart, deeply religious, and so like I remember I'm like, hold on. When you say your relationship with God, are you talking? And I kind of described all this. He's like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I'm like, dude, now I get it. I just thought you were stupid. I thought you were fooled. I just thought you believed all this dumb shit that the priests are selling you. He's like, no, man. The thing with God is the experience. And I'm like, now I get it. I now have had that experience. Now, I'm not religious in the sense like I don't go to a church. I don't believe any dogma, but I am not atheist anymore. Now I'm like, oh, that's foolish. Of course, I like to call it source, but God, we're talking about God, the universe. It's the same thing. Of course, God exists. Of course, we're all one. Of course. That ecstatic religious feeling I totally get now.
No,
So
it has nothing to do with religion. What? Again, breathe in, breathe out. There was like a wow effect moment. Like, ooh, let's suck this in the DNA right here because that is the truth. So wow. So, I mean, from where you started to just beginning.
I mean,
I mean,
it doesn't seem like
come on. Come on. You know, it's like
it's
this
my
is a
journey. So my journey is never that remarkable to me. You know.
To me, this is a miracle. This is what sounds like a miracle to me. Like somebody who's tapping into the self with a big S, which is the oneness and the I amness, the I am that I am.
Right.
There is nothing really but the self. And the self, the guru, and God is one, is the same thing. So it's like, wow. Yeah. I'm going to repeat that for me, like over in a loop, you know, I'm just going to do a loop of what you just speak about.
Well, you have to experience it. Like, I didn't understand what any of these people were talking about because I never had that experience.
You have, and it's not everybody. Not everybody's going to have the same timing. It can be many, many, many lifetimes, you know, to get to experience this. This is deep because you've been working at this probably for thousands of years and you don't even know it. You know what I'm saying? It just happened now for you. So what's the next big bang in Taco Max's universe? What's going on? Promote and show the world.
Yeah. So right now, I probably the next thing is I'm not really sure. Like I kind of know. I think I know. I'm pretty sure I know the direction, but it hasn't started yet, and we're not. So it's one of those things where until the gears are going, like I'm not going to be like, oh, it's this, because it may not be that. So right now, honestly, I'm focused family, ranch, self. I'm kind of in between things right now. I kind of finished my scribe sort of time. We finished the last thing like in the next 2 months, and then I'm really, truly, totally out. And then my next thing will probably start in the fall or maybe early next year.
Okay, so thank you for sharing this. And if someone or they wanted to get to your tribe or what, you know, any
TuckerMax.com.
TuckerMax.com.
Very simple.
With a big I am so deeply, honestly, I'm so deeply grateful, and I'm kind of glad that we took like so many, I don't know, hoops to get here, you and I because it just feels so right now. Like I don't want to
We had this scheduled for weeks, and we like tried to get on 6 times, and my Wi-Fi was broken. Then you got flooded or whatever. You had a storm hit, and then my Wi-Fi broke again.
It's ridiculous. I actually broke a tooth like yesterday, and so I had to schedule anyway, and it's been like, and I ask, you know, source, like, what's going on? And the guys, they all say, well, it's not an alignment part, you two, and you got
Be patient.
You got to be patient. And for me, it was like what I got for me, and then selfishly, I say is like be honest with yourself. That was so cool because it's something that we all have a hard time with. So like, okay, Juju, you moved again. Get yourself in the mirror and be honest with Tucker. This is like he's a celebrity entrepreneur, but just get to the point. You know what I'm saying? No fluffing around and.
Yep.
And I just honor you. You're champion of the heart, and I just hope that you continue to share, experiment with yourself, but also with that, really expand upon and share that with entrepreneurs and human beings. They need to hear it. They need to hear that revolution of the self that you went through, because it's going to help a lot of people. It's helping a lot of people.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. Your journey, your purpose is amazing. I'm very grateful and honestly super, super grateful. Privileged, actually. So I know you got to go and feed the chicken, right? I'm so jealous. I can't wait to have your life right now. I want to feed chicken. So thank you all for showing up. And I hope that you enjoyed the show and expand your consciousness with Tucker. And we're going to jump into his wisdom here shortly. And I know he's got to go. So big, big love, Dr. Max. We love you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This was so transparent, so powerful. And the few notes that I took, because there's so many, I'm trying to really bring the wisdom to that essence of the core episode today, to what do you want out of your success and why do you want success? And one of the problem that was really part of this episode, the problem that we shared, that Tucker shared with his personal journey, was that truly most entrepreneurs today are so productive. We are so productive, so active. And is there something in that caused us to resist change, or perhaps even, we're so productive. We want to win, we want to be successful. But is there a deeper place that we want to be successful to avoid the pain, to avoid personal issue, to avoid being in touch with our emotional self? You know what I'm saying? And I find out that it totally resonated with me, because at one point I also wanted to be super successful, but I realized too that it was to cover up a deep, deep wound within myself that I was not ready to face. So ask yourself this question, right? Why do you want to be successful? Perhaps you want to be famous and, rich and famous, right? Or you want to achieve some type of success. But why? Why is that? Ask yourself that question. Do you want to achieve this big goal to avoid a part of yourself? So you don't have to think about it, right? But like Tucker mentioned, there's a big price to pay when we avoid pain. We cannot run away from it. It's going to catch up with us, and it's going to catch up with you. And one of his epiphany was later on in his journey, obviously, when he realized that one of the tools that he could access this peace within himself was to be to work on himself, to do nothing. But to do nothing was being conscious of inner work. Because we can be lazy and we can be doing nothing, but I'm talking about doing nothing in a conscious way. Perhaps for you, it is to just sit there and develop your intuition and meditate on how you feel, or perhaps it is to try to find an ease in just walking. Perhaps it is, whatever practice you have, or reading a book, but something that you do so precisely in the moment that you become intensely aware more and more and more about who you are, and most definitely accepting the things that you thought you were, and realizing that all the things that you think you are needs to be basically scratched away. And so a layer at a time, and covering who you are, which at the end of the day, is there an identity attached to it? That's for you to decide. So we must seek something within ourselves in order to achieve what's outside. And if you really pay attention to the show, to this episode with Tucker Max, it's most evident that we at one point will come to the same conclusion. That the more we try to identify with things outside of ourselves, for instance, the labels, I'm a writer, or I'm a spiritual being, or I am that, I am this thing, the less we connect with who we are. Now, there is different names and many names, but even that, to scratch, anytime you feel, okay, I am this, or I am spiritual, or I am this, or I am Buddhist, or all this is good, but there are still words. So when we remove the labels, right? So can you imagine you are on your journey to create your life, and you being an entrepreneur, and realizing that underneath of that, who you are is the magnet to attract the things that, you want or think you want. So there is so many versions of spirituality, but when we scratch that word spirituality, we are left with I am that which I am. So can you imagine if you really tap in to that ease and that peace within yourself? And once you in that higher state of consciousness, which is your true nature, the nature of bliss, then of course things might come and go, and you are no longer attached to that outcome which make you suffer or make you happy. So most people are going to bounce around happiness and pain, and some more into suffering, because pain and suffering is a different thing. But in the same time, it's like the yo-yo, up and down, up and down, up and down, until you're just so tired of up and down that you just start to scratch the pain and you want to deal with it. So from this episode, this is what reflected was you can't avoid the pain. You have to start paying attention. And the word pain actually is P for pain, attention inward now. Pay attention inward now. And there's many, many tools, many helps out there. But at the end of the day, it will be up to you to make those changes. So, connecting the dots, right? You want to connect the dots. Connecting the dots with your emotional baggage, for instance, and accepting certain things that you are feeling in your life, and the acceptance, right? Acceptance is a big door to realize the self, and to get to that place of ease and grace and happiness. So one of the reasons that Tucker says, one of the reasons that he is a successful writer, it's because he's never tried to be a writer. I think that was so profound, because imagine we're trying so hard to become that something. And then you get to that place where you achieve that goal, and then you realize, oh, well, that's not good enough. I want something else now. So it never really stopped. And to me, that's pure suffering, because it never stops. You never stop desiring, and it's an addiction to wanting more of something, which is really true suffering. And so reflecting on that, he says, we were talking about enlightenment, and he says it is something beyond words. So it's so profound. You can't even explain it in words, what enlightenment is, unless you experience it yourself. So nobody really can. I mean, we can put into words, but it won't mean anything to you, because you're the one who has the experience. So really accepting where you are today and be willing to change. I mean, at one point, we're so sick and tired of being sick and tired that we reach that point where we're like, okay, that's it. I make a decision, and there's something needs to change, and we need to take responsibility for the things that we allow in our lives, and stop pointing the finger out, or it's my parents, or it's the government, or it's the society. No. So it's like, stop complaining about the things that you allow in your life. That's a big deal. And it might be not the right timing for you to get to that step right now, and that's okay. Just listen to others and know that so many successful entrepreneurs have been through the trenches. And so now here we are sharing with you keys to unlock your full potential. So I hope that you are enjoying the space that we're creating for you to tap in. And hopefully a sense where you feel like you're not alone. We're all one. Like Tucker Max says, we are one. There is no separation. There's no such a thing. So I wanted to thank you for connecting with us. If you haven't joined our mystical tribe on Facebook, do so. It would be great to know you and to see you there. We have many things happening throughout the year. gathering and retreats and why not? And please connect with us. I want you to feel like you have a family, because I know I felt lonely for so long and so strange that I want to give you that now. The things that I didn't have, I created so you don't have to go through what I went through. That makes sense. So connect with us, the mysticalmavericks.com. And I hope that you're enjoying those shows with incredible mystical mavericks who are joining with us every week. Thank you so much for being here. Love and respect. Namaste.
You have just listened to another enlightening episode of Mystical Mavericks with Juju. Please visit mysticalmavericks.com for additional resources and to learn more about our mentorship, giveaways, and gatherings. Be sure to subscribe and share so you don't miss the next episode of Mystical Mavericks.